So, okay, we're at session 19 here, and we're making our way through the mining scenarios. We're going to land the plane hopefully today. We've gone through, just as a recap real quick, we've gone through the 504 program, the 7A program, Freddie Mac, right, Fannie Mae, life insurance company, CMBS, loans, hard money, soft money, bridge lenders, right? So you're getting a whole slew of these different types of programs, which is really good because it's giving you kind of a holistic picture and understanding of, like, what are the scenarios, and it's really, really good for you. So what we'll do is we'll go through some scenarios today, and I don't know if have you gone through each one of those yet?
Yeah, I watched all of the videos from them, and then I mostly did the project that goes with it. The first one, that's why do we need their contact information? I feel like it's to make sure that we can stay in contact with them, but
yeah, 100%. Let's just walk through each one, and we're not going to do each individual one because there's a lot of lap over, but we'll go through one scenario, and then we'll kind of, if we have the time, we'll add to some things as we go through. So basically, you're right. Why do we need their contact information? There's a couple of reasons. You hit on the first one, right? Number one, we need to be able to get a hold of them, right? The other one is because so we can start to track, right? We kind of go like, okay, who did this person come from, and how did we find them? And if we're doing some future marketing, we would definitely want to have that information too, so we can kind of follow these scenarios. So there's lots of reasons why we want to get their contact information fast, and so those would be the reasons for sure. So nothing too complicated there, but definitely something that a lot of times people forget to get contact information. And then the next one is, why is urgency such a big deal? And so what do you think?
Urgency is going to be important because if a client is not urgent, or if they have no sense of urgency and there's nothing that's pushing them to get the loan done, then they're less likely to follow through. And even if they do follow through, they're going to be dragging their feet with documents and signing things and getting us paperwork, and all of that can basically kill a deal if they're moving too slow.
100%. Yeah, spot on. This is the number one reason why deals die. There's no urgency, there's no motivation, and honestly, you can't manufacture it. It's either there or it's not. Okay, I'm sure you can help kind of incentivize sometimes if I help kind of go, hey, we need to get this stuff in fast, but that's about as far as it's going to go. An example of this is a big line of credit I'm working on right now, and the guy, he would be nice for him to get it done, but he doesn't need to get it done, right? So we're going to be having that conversation because we kind of went through the process, and then he just sort of dropped off the map, and then he popped back up, and so again, it's okay, just but if I can't identify urgency fast, then chances are you're going to be pushing a rope, which never works.
Yeah.
So that's great. So it's critical to really train your thoughts to go, okay, where's the urgency on this? Because if it's not there, it'll just go away eventually. Okay, what's really important to understand when dealing with small business owners? What do you think?
Small business owners are less likely to have done any sort of work with a loan, so they're going to be kind of at a loss. Like, they won't know what a lot of the words mean, or know what different loans do or how it can benefit them. So they're going to need a lot more hand holding, for lack of a better term. And yeah, they're just going to be more novice to the whole thing.
Yeah, 100%. Great way to describe it, novice. Yeah, they're just, kind of have a couple of different categories of people. You have someone who's novice, they know they're novice and they're okay with it, right? There's some people who are novice, but they don't want to admit it, and they pretend that they're not a novice, right? Those are a little bit tougher to wrestle through. And then there's some people who think they know a lot more than they do, right? You just have all these different kinds of dynamics, but they're novice. They've never done it. And so I have to remember all the time that I'm like, okay, I got to slow it down, explain what this thing means, what LTV is, what does that mean when I'm talking about SBA? And I really try to slow down and say, does that make sense what I'm saying? And I also try to give them permission to not know. Because sometimes people are kind of like, I don't want to sound dumb, and so I always let them know, hey, I just want you to know up front, I don't expect you to know this. And so it's okay if you have questions, I'm going to expect otherwise, right? And I always try to affirm them to say, you're really good at what you do. If I tried to come do what you do, I have no idea. And I'd be asking lots of.
Yeah, I heard that on the small business auto video when you said that. And I was like, that's a great way to say that, because I mean, it's easy to not see value in what other people do when you're not the one who's doing it. But it's like, oh, well, I could do that myself. Yeah, I mean, you could.
Good. And then I always go back to just like, be nice if we had infinite time, right? It's like,
Mhm.
that's why I lean on these other people. It's like my recruiter said, he's like, you really could do what I do, right? He's like, I've learned this craft and I take time to do it, but it's like, well, yes, but I don't want to, and I don't have the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, you're doing great, honestly.
Right. So, so yeah. Okay, so what are you trying to figure out when asking about the loan amount requested? What are we trying to do there?
I'm not 100% sure that I'm right on this, but I think that it's gauging if the client is reasonable and understands kind of what is really out there, or if they're going to be open to what actually is there rather than just what they would prefer. Like, you're not going to find a 2% loan, right? It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. So there's a couple of elements. One of them is what you said, like expectations, alignment, right? We're always trying to get expectations and reality, right, aligned. It's kind of like when I always tell people is, well, reason you get frustrated is because here's reality and then here's your expectations, right?
Yeah.
And somehow they just weren't together. And so we're trying to get those two together so you're not, right? So it's the same thing for them. You want to set their expectations and make sure they're aligned, right, with market. That would be one of the elements. The other one is that they just don't know. Like they don't understand, what does that mean? How much can I get? What is, so we're having to kind of educate them to say, look, if you do SBA, you can get up to 90%, right?
Mhm.
If you do conventional, you can do 80, right? So it just means you're going to have to put more money down. And then you want to tangibilize that to them, like, hey, that's going to be 100,000 versus 200,000,
Mhm.
right? Because now they're going like, whoa, that's a lot of money, right? And so you're just helping them kind of grapple with that, and then them go, okay, that makes sense, right? So that's why we spend time on that, because it also helps me understand that, if they tell me I'm looking for a $10 million loan versus a two, just totally different lender types. So
Mhm.
helps me kind of start to understand some things as I'm talking. So does that make sense?
Yes.
Great. And then you can also help them understand payment, so and then they can go, oh, okay, I'm paying this much in rent and this is how much I pay now. And okay, that makes sense. So, okay. So, why does it matter that we understand information about the asset and their business? What do you think?
Well, when we're going through and asking the questions, I think it was on the one where he's wanting to build a bunch of houses. We're asking about, unit mix and what the subdivision is going to look like. Are there amenities, and just getting a big picture of the whole thing, and where it is um, in relation to like things around it, like is it a metro area or something like that. And all of those things boil down to each thing has its own risks. I can't say that. And Each thing has its own risks and different loans that are going to be applicable to different
Oh.
properties, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Yeah, it's yeah, you really like if you come in, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get you're trying to visualizing it, this picture of like, okay, here's the asset, here's all the mechanics of that. I understand what the building type is and square footage and, when was it built and, what's the condition and all these things you kind of start. So now you're starting to get a picture in your mind of like, okay, now I'm understanding, that's why I always try to get on to Google and see what it looks like. Right? Because I'm like, oh, remember we did that one time, like, okay, you see how ugly this is?
Yeah.
That's right. I'm like, oh, okay.
Where is it?
That's not the greatest there, so you just kind of start to paint a picture about the asset itself. Okay. And then the business, right? The same thing. I really start going through in my mind. I'm like, okay, so the way a business runs is you have people, you got to have some capital, you got to have some sort of strategy that you're doing. Like, what's your niche, right? And then, what is your revenue source, right? And how does that sales cycle work? If you're making a sale, how long is that cycle? Are you getting cash? Is it a receivable? So I just start to kind of walk through, like, understand, like, when did you start the business? What is it? How does it work? How do you make money? Things like that. So I'm just trying to get my arms around the business to really understand because if I get off the phone and I go, okay, I have a really good understanding of that business. I mean, I think I understand how they make money. I understand when they started. I understand how many employees they have. I kind of understand, what that life cycle is, how they make the money. I feel good. I could explain it to somebody. That's my temperature check to make sure I know what I'm talking about. Okay.
And I would assume like it's good whenever, I mean, for me, I'm very novice at this. So whenever you've had practice and you are used to doing it and like, oh, well, this kind of thing will end up with this kind of loan, or lenders like to see this and lenders don't like to see this. Whenever they explain everything to you and you get a good picture of everything, you can kind of say in your head, like, yeah, that would work great, or no, that's probably not going to be.
100%. I mean, I've had so many conversations, and it's not because I'm smart, but it's just because I've talked to so many people and I've had so many conversations that I can be in a room and my perspective is just very different because I just know immediately if this is going to fly or not, right? Like I'll just be talking to somebody and I'm like, okay, yeah, this is going to be good, or this is going to be problematic, or this is going to work, or that's not. And so I'm really just, my mind is so trained to just kind of, when you sit in meetings with me, it's just kind of, walking through it. And then you have to kind of unpack it and go, okay, what happened there? And so once I see something, I'll just start pressing into it, right?
Mhm.
And so I really try to go to cash flow pretty quick. I'm like, how you making money and like what's going on? And because people tell me, they'll go, yeah, make a ton of money, right? But then I see their tax returns and I'm like, well, you're losing money. So like, what's going on?
Yeah.
They're like, well, we have a lot of cash. I don't show it on my tax returns. It's like, well, okay. So,
If you can do that.
and so, yeah, you just really start walking through people's businesses and you start to understand the different kinds of businesses and start to go, that one's going to be a tough sell, for somebody, if it's a restaurant and, I already kind of know walking in, if it's a restaurant, what's going on and how's it been doing? Because those are already an uphill battle.
Mhm.
So just, you just start to kind of know what's acceptable, what's not. Okay. Makes sense.
Mhm.
Good. Okay. So, it says here, what are you trying to find out about the individual's business cash flow and why does it even matter? So
We are looking at their cash flow and kind of asking some basic questions so we could run a quick cash flow and get an idea of what their debt service coverage ratio is going to look like. And if that is 1.2 or above, then great, we're golden and it's totally fine. But whenever it's below, it's good to go ahead and let them know that this is going to be a little bit difficult to sell this, and let them know why, and explain debt service coverage ratio and why lenders want that and all of those things.
Yeah, great job. Yeah, spot on. Yep, we're just looking at cash flow and we want to get to it as fast as possible. And it's just, it's the magically delicious button that everybody needs, right? So it's just either there or it's not. And, you know, so you have to press into it, and you'll find people will squirm a little bit about, well, you know, they don't, and I always say, hey, it's okay. Like, we just need to know, because,
Yeah.
you know, if it doesn't work, we just need to know now, because then we can at least, you know, at least I have a shot to work through it. And you can explain things to me, right?
Mhm.
So
Before it's too late and everyone's like,
yeah.
oh, I didn't know that.
Well, Dan just came the other day. He was working on this deal, and the guys failed to disclose to him that they were behind on their taxes on their property by $100,000.
Oh my goodness.
I said, did you ask that? He goes, I asked that question. I said, well, you know, I said, you just need to let him know, like, hey, you've got to be upfront with me, because I cannot represent you if you're not. And it's worse if you don't, and they find out, because now they start to go, you know, are you hiding things from me? And so I always try to communicate that with clients. I'm look, just tell me everything, you know, because they always come in and they think somehow they're like, well, you know, don't tell them this or don't tell them that. I'm like, no, that's not how it works.
Tell it all.
It's like, we're just going to be very transparent. And I said, it's just the best policy. And you know, because, you know, they're not dumb and they'll figure it out. So
Yeah, not their first rodeo.
not their first rodeo, and we don't operate that way. So, how should we approach asking about the the client's credit, I should say?
So I think it's really just candidly, like from watching the phone calls or I guess listening to the phone calls, it's just really upfront. It's not something to be like, oh, like, what's your credit score? Like, judgmental or anything. But I feel like someone who's wanting to get a loan is aware that these questions are coming and this is important information. So just candidly, you know, have you had foreclosures? Have you had any bankruptcies or any criminal activity, just so that we can get ahead of it?
Yeah, spot on. Yeah, just you know, that's one of our, we have kind of 10, which we'll eventually walk you through in detail, but, you know.
Candid but gracious.
Candid but gracious, you're already on it, right? So that's really a big deal for us. We just need to be upfront. We don't need to be rude, but we need to be upfront, because, you know, again, we just need to get to reality fast. And, you know, that's the best thing for the client. And so we just, and you got to, and the one thing to remember on credit is you have to be really specific with them, because remember that a lot of times, especially if they're small business owners, is they just think FICO, 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 FICO. And they don't think that, well, you know, I had a bankruptcy like 7 years ago, but it's not on my credit score anymore, so it doesn't matter. So that's how they've been trained in their mind. And so someone could ask them the question and they'll go, yeah, my credit's fine, I have no issues. And even someone could say, well, you have any bankruptcies? They'll still say, yeah, no, because it dropped off their credit after 7 years. Okay. But we need to know, have you
they'll know
ever, all right?
Yeah.
And so that's why I try to train everybody to ask, though, like, have you ever had bankruptcy, foreclosure, short sale, right? Because, you know, lenders in the commercial world just think differently about it. And it's really comes back to one thing, which is just, it's character. That's what they're trying to find out. Like, did you do everything you could to try to figure it out, or did you just try to bail out? Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, makes sense.
Yes.
Good. Okay. What is it that you're trying to figure out on someone's credibility?
We're trying to see if they have sustainable evidence that they are competent in a, not like competent like they're dumb, but if they have a competency to run the business, obviously they could be smart in a million ways, but if they want to have a car wash and they've been working in a restaurant for 10 years, they don't really have that there.
Yeah, exactly. No, you're spot on. Yeah, I mean, like, because to your point, like, you're not, I'm not dumb, but I may be incompetent when it comes to like running a law firm, right? Like, I just haven't ever done it, and wouldn't want to run it. But
Yeah.
yeah, you just, we have to understand, like, does this person have the kind of the bones, so to speak, to sort of navigate this industry? And do they have, it's kind of like, somebody says, well, I've read every book about being a football player. It's like, okay, well, have you ever actually been
Have
on
you
the
ever played
field?
football? Yeah.
Have you gotten hit? Have you run down,
Yeah.
run to play, right? So there's just, when somebody's kind of, got a couple of bumps and bruises and they're still in the game. So that kind of helps you go, okay, this person understands how to run this business,
Yeah, I can trust them to do this.
Exactly. So that's really what we're looking for. And again, if someone's never been in it, you could still probably make the argument that, well, they've done this other business and it's kind of like it. And I
Mhm.
think the skill set would translate really well. I did that with a guy in Colorado who never done a car wash. He ran vending machine kind of business for a while. And I was just listening to him like, okay, I can make the argument that you have the skill set to transfer over here. And we were able to make it work. So so I always try to listen and kind of go, is there anything else they have that could make it work? So something to think about. Okay, why should we talk about how we are compensated?
We want to talk about this as soon as we can, just because it's could be a deal breaker for someone else or even on our side if they're unreasonable or they don't see value in what we do. Then it's better to just go ahead and walk away. As much as we could see it as we're helping. If they don't see value in that and they don't want to, I guess, fit the bill for that, then
Yeah,
that's totally fine. And we just got to part ways there.
100%. Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, like I'll give you an example. We're working on a deal in Texas right now. They're getting really close to it, 67 million. And I was on the phone the other day with the guy and I said, look, here's how we get paid. This is sort of what I'm thinking about charging. And I said, I want you guys to go like have that discussion, because we've kind of gotten this far, and I feel like this is a good. Let's start kind of digesting this. And so then he came back and said, hey, I've talked to everybody. This is sort of what we're thinking. And so I kind of said, well, let me go back. And we kind of went back and forth. And finally, we're able to come to some terms that I think we both felt comfortable with. But the part of that was for me is obviously the compensation is obviously, that, but it's more than that. I'm looking at how did they respond or what's their kind of
Mhm.
attitude or how, because that starts to tell me if I'm dealing with somebody that's fair, reasonable, honest, transparent. That's what I'm looking for. Are they fair, right? Are they like, no, forget you, da 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 da, right? Or
Mhm.
they're like, no, okay, here's what we're thinking. This is why I sort of think this would make more sense. Okay, all right, that's fair, right? Are they reasonable, right? Did they kind of just like say we're cutting it in a third, right? It's like, well, that's not reasonable.
It's not really how it
Okay,
works.
you know, and are they honest and transparent, right? Like, and when I think about transparency, I say to myself, okay, did somebody kind of take the sheets off, so to speak, and just say, hey, look, here's my situation, right? Here's what's going on, and here's sort of why this would make sense. I'm talking to this other group, and you know what I mean? Like, that's like, okay, good. I know what I'm working with, right? Versus the person that's like, well, I'm not going to tell them anything, and I'll
Yeah.
string them
Keep everything
along,
a secret. Yeah.
and then at the last minute, I'll use them, abuse them, and kick them out of the door, right? So,
Mhm.
so there's a little bit of strategy behind the way I approach compensation with people because I'm always trying to I'm looking more for characteristics about their character than I am the actual money. Obviously, money matters, you know, because I'm looking long term. So
Yeah.
um,
The relationship is also extremely important.
it's huge, very, very big, because I'm very much focused on I want to develop a relationship with this person for a long time. So or not. So
Yeah.
yeah. So why do you want to explain the distinctions about recourse versus non-recourse? What do you think?
Well, clients might not know what that means really, and the terminology is, there are a million terms that they might not know it means, but this one's really big because if they are signing a recourse loan and giving that personal guarantee and they don't know what that means, then they've kind of put themselves in a rope. And with especially small business owners, that's especially true because they really don't know. For the most part, they don't know what is going on at all. So they just see recourse and they're like, oh, that's just another word. And they'll sign it and have no idea what they've signed themselves up for.
100% spot on. Yeah, you know, people, that's why you're always kind of pressing a little bit to go, does that make sense? Do you understand what I'm saying? Because, you know, a lot of times the spouse also, it's important, like, hey, it's recourse. It
Mhm.
also means your spouse is going to sign, right? They're personally going to sign the loan themselves. Okay. So I even kind of expound that a little bit for several reasons. One is I want them to go, oh, okay. Well, what does
Mhm.
that mean?
Really think about it.
um, the second reason is if there's some tension in that relationship going on that maybe they haven't fully told me, that's usually about the time that'll come up. It'll be like, well, I don't know if they're going to go for that. I'm like, okay, well, why? What's going on? Right. Well, we're sort of talking about maybe splitting, you know what I mean? It's like, okay, now it's all coming up. So
I just asked you
yeah,
that.
okay, just ask that question, right? So that's sort of, you know, you're just trying to sort of just like, I don't want anybody to get to the table when they're signing loan documents and go, what in the heck is this? Right? I'm not
Mhm.
signing that. Um, you know, so that's definitely a reason. And then just if somebody is quite frankly sophisticated, you know, like this group that we're dealing with in Texas, you know, we're on the phone and we were having that, you know, it's like, hey, you know, what are you thinking about? It's like, well, we need a completion guarantee. Well, is that a repayment guarantee? Well, yeah. He goes, well, that's sort of like a deal killer, you know. So we're just sort of having that discussion because it's a big deal, you know. I mean, you know, it's not chump change if you're saying, well, I'm signing
Yeah.
personally for $65 million. You know?
Yeah.
Okay, you put a noose around your neck, and if you fall, you're dead. So
Yeah. Don't slip.
don't slip. Okay, so what do we mean by loyalty?
We mean that the client is going to give us a fair shot at getting the deal, being transparent with us. Just, yeah, I think that's, yeah.
Yeah, you're very smart. Yeah, just that's it. Just getting a fair shot. It's all we're asking for. And you know, quite frankly, sometimes they just flat out say, "Hey, I'm just going to work with you, not talking to anybody else." Like, great, you know. But you know, we do. I always I always assume they're not. Okay. So I just always say, hey, who else are you? So I'm assumptive. Who else are you talking to right now? Right. I'm giving them permission to tell me, right. And not feel like it's awkward. So I'm like, hey, who else are you talking to? Right. And then just let them tell me, well, I'm talking to da 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 da. Okay, great. So then again, I might go, well, hey, that sounds pretty good. Like, I think you should just go take that. Why don't you take that? Right. That's another question I ask. Why don't you just take that? And then they might go, well, you know, I don't really like, you know, XYZ or whatever. So,
That makes me think of in recruitment, we do on the last day prep. Usually, I was asked the question, and you typically ask like, "Hey, what other house are you prepping? Like, where else are you looking? What do you like about them? What do you see there that you don't see here?" And just kind of press them to get them. That's like so creepy, but like press
yeah,
them to say, oh, well, they just seem like they were better friends. Oh, well, my friend is, right there and right there and right there. And it's kind of a, you know, recruitment's kind of a wholesaling thing, but
Yeah, that's great. No, that's fantastic. It is, you're right. Yeah, it's unbelievable. Great
yeah.
question to ask, because you get some intel trying to figure out where somebody's at, what's going on underneath the hood. So good questions. Okay. Does net worth matter for small business deals? Why or why not? What do you think?
It's not going to matter as much. I mean, if their net worth is like zero or negative, then that could be stressful.
Yeah.
But in general, it's not going to matter as much as it would in anything else. But I think it's because the government is insuring that loan, so they're not that worried about, like, they're willing to take a bigger risk with them.
Yeah. Yeah, they're really focused on just cash flow. I mean, it'd certainly be nice if somebody has a good net worth, but yeah, you're right. It's just they're just looking at like, hey, does the business cash flow, and net worth is a secondary thing to them. They're not overly concerned, versus on investment deals, totally different animal. So, why is it so important to understand value on the property?
We want to understand the value on the property because the lender is going to send the or they're going to order the appraisal. And so if that appraisal comes out to be way off of the value that we were assuming, then that could end up killing the deal or putting us in a really tough spot between the borrower and the lender.
100%. Yeah, I mean, value's everything on these deals. If all of a sudden we didn't do some homework up front and really feel like, okay, we've got our arms around this value of the property, we could go all the way down the road for 45 days and find out, oh my gosh, this isn't going to appraise. And especially for small business owners, if that value's not there, that could really kill a deal, because they go, gosh, I was stretching it at 10% down. All of a sudden I have to put another 3 or 4, that could kill the deal. So we really try to press into that. I really pretty focused on getting comps and having conversations. And I really push the brokers. They're always like, oh, it'll appraise fine. I said, well, I understand that. I said, but I need some comps. Like, just
Yeah.
show me, right, that it is. And then, and I always tell them, I said, look, it's in your benefit. If you go get that,
sorry.
I said, if you go get those and we can substantiate it, just better chances the appraisal doesn't come in low, and then you just lost your deal, right? So I just said, it's gotta sell. So the in terms of the phase one, what do you think on that?
The phase one is a report that a environmental engineer does, and they come in and kind of just pull the records of what all has been on this property or what was this building used for in the past, and they look through to make sure that it wasn't like a gas station or maybe a car wash, like anything that's going to be chemical dumping, or not a car wash, a auto shop.
Yeah.
They could be like chemical dumping. There could be issues with the land itself, and whenever that happens and the land is contaminated, then it's harder to get a loan for that property.
Yeah, absolutely. Great job. It's especially in a refinance, it's one of those questions you want to ask really fast. Did you ever get a phase one report on this property? And if the answer is no, it's like hard timeout, right? Like, we need to get one now, because there's tanks under there that'll kill the deal like that. It's just EPA comes in. It's a messy situation. And so we definitely like to press in on that for sure. And on the purchase, it's just more like, hey, we're going to have to get one. And, this is
you'll have to have it anyways. May as well front load the risk rather than getting all the way down the line.
Exactly. Spot on. Okay. What are some key things to know about someone who is doing a construction loan? What do you think?
So there were like a million questions with this, but I remember that it's, asking how much should they pay for, or what was the purchase price, and then like how much should they actually spend on it. Are there any issues with the like are there any issues like deed restrictions or encroachments or easements, seeing like what their timeline is, what their construction budget is, just asking like all of the minuscule questions that like seem like they're not that big of a deal, but they all add up, and one wrong answer could make a big difference.
Yeah, big time. No, great job. You're super smart. The probably the biggest major question you're going to want to ask them is saying, like, especially for small business owners, have you started the process of getting a budget? Okay. That's a really good, just like, because it tells you if they're like, well, no. And you're like, well, let me tell you why. So here's what happens. These contractors, when you engage them, they have to go through this pretty lengthy process to go, I need to get some architect drawings if I'm going to bid it, because I don't know what I'm bidding, right? So then they get the plans. When those are done, that takes time. And then they have to go out and get a bunch of GCs or a bunch of subs to bid it. The plumber, the concrete guy, the framer, and that, so it's like that takes time too. And so you're trying to just get a sense, like, where are you at in the process? Because this stuff just takes time, and they just don't understand, because they haven't done it, like how much time is involved and how much that can cause a problem. Because if we start the process and they have just this kind of rough guesstimate in the air,
Mhm.
oh, I think it's going to be this. If we get an appraisal and that appraisal comes in, we're like, well, it was $2 million. And then the budget comes back. It's like, well, it's actually 3. It's like,
Like, well, this is
oops,
probably going to be a good place to go.
mistake, right? Yeah. So we're like, that's a good starting place. Like, where are you at in the budget? Where are you at in the process? What's going on? And, if they're like, well, I haven't done anything, then that's usually a timeout for me. I'm usually like, look, we need to kind of pull back for a minute. If you have to close in 60 days and you're under contract, you haven't done that, like, that's not going to happen. Like, you
Yeah,
need
it
to.
also speaks to urgency. Like, what are you doing?
Spot on. Yeah, 100%. You're just, yeah, engagement, urgency. It's like, okay, what are we doing? Like, seriousness. Like, are you really serious? Or, yeah. So good stuff. Final thing is just, what do you think you want to know about them personally? What do you think?
Well, the whole spouse thing, how are you and your wife or husband or anything? Asking if everyone who works there is a citizen. And then the silly question, like, are you, what's the word? I can't think of the word. It's basically like, are you able to sign these? Like, are you,
Yes.
um,
Yeah. Do you have the sort of capacity,
yeah,
you're in the right frame of mind, right? And that's a little bit more, discerning, right? Because, I mean, if I'm talking to somebody that's, like lucid, right? Or, I mean, I remember talking to a guy one time, and I just remember being on the phone. I was like, man, I don't, he just does not seem like he's all
there.
together, right? Like, just some of the way he'd kind of fumble over some things, or he just lose his train of thought. And I'm like, so I had to get his son on the line, right? And be like, hey, is your dad okay? Like, what's going on? And again, these are all a little sensitive, but you're always trying to make sure. And I told him, I said, look, I'm just going to be honest with you. I said, I'm not comfortable, like, doing this deal unless we really figure out, like, is there a cosigner? Or I just said, I just not, he's just not in the right
Yeah,
state.
something's off. Yeah.
Yeah. And it came to find out he was, like, getting dementia, and
Oh,
we didn't do the deal just because I just, it's just not a good place to be.
mhm.
So yeah, I just want to kind of know things personally, but again, these are all good things to know. And you go through small business, you're dealing with that. If you're dealing with investment, you're kind of starting to figure out and focus a little bit more on the asset itself. Okay. And then you get into like subdivision home. Again, that's dealing a lot with construction, and there's some different things there. And then you're starting to see self-storage, right? Just like, what are the nuances? So I gave a little bit of just a broad verse on those things, but The questions are all applicable. There's just little nuances when you get into different asset types. And so it was really important that you understand some loan programs, understand some application stuff. How do we kind of ask questions, and why do we do things? You know, there's always a why behind what we do here. We always want to know, like, why do we do it that way? Like, why are we asking this? And it's like, well, here's the reason why. Every one of these gray hairs will tell you why. So
because I didn't one time,
yeah,
and now I always will.
all those failures of David is all in the questions. So really, for next time, what we're going to do, I'm going to have you